Hi, Dad.
We are about to record one of the most interesting sessions on the third temple. Are you ready?
Always.
When people talk about the third temple, I'm thinking, man, maybe they should mention the fourth temple. Because when you look historically, this is what happens. There was a tabernacle there for almost 500 years,
Hmm?
first in the wilderness, then in Shiloh. Then there was a temple of Solomon that stood there somewhat short of 400 years. Then
Hmm.
was destroyed. Then Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple, and it was not great because when you read in Ezra,
They,
people were literally crying.
yeah.
And then 20 BC, Herod rebuilt. Now, he did not just fix, he literally replaced the stones with the new.
Hmm.
Because the 500-year-old structure was so dilapidated that what Herod built, you could technically call the third temple.
Hmm.
But for the sake of argument, let's say it's still a second temple. And then it was finally destroyed. So after about 600 years of existence after captivity, the temple was destroyed.
Yep.
Now, we read from the scripture that all these temples pointed out to the temple in heaven.
Hmm.
And while the tabernacle stood on earth, the way to the temple in heaven was not yet open.
Yeah.
And so now comes this big challenge. Will there be a third temple? And papers are printed with the third temple model, and there's a lot of discussion. There's thousands. We would have no time to analyze all the videos out there about the third temple. When we were with family in Jerusalem in 2018, I had to take a picture on that square with the menorah. And it was interesting to me because that menorah was gifted by a Ukrainian billionaire oligarch, Vadim Rabinovich. Now he's considered a traitor because he was pro-Russian, was a member of parliament, and sometime before collapse of Soviet Union, he served jail terms. He's a really shady person. And many people were upset because the names to streets and squares in Jerusalem are given to people who lived prior to uh, 1500s. So they have to be dead at least for 500 years. But here's a guy who's alive, but hey, he gifted the menorah. Now
Amen.
it's interesting that this menorah is heavier than original. Original was only 70 pounds. Remember, a talent of gold?
Yeah.
This one is 200 pounds at a cost of $3 million. And they named the square in his name. It's Rabinovich. It's Western Ukrainian variation of a name that comes, of course, from the root rabbi. Now, there's a lot of speculation. You see some dignified leaders saying, well, we could fit the temple beside the Dome of the Rock. Recently, I heard something interesting. The folks from Temple Institute saying, well, we don't need much space. We could bring a portable tabernacle just the way it was in the wilderness. If you just give us permission, we bring the portable tabernacle and we'll set it up. I watched recently a video guy arguing that by October 2026, Israel would reach an agreement as a concession for two-state solution that they would be allowed to erect portable tabernacle on a Temple Mount. All kind of ideas. Some go further, say, no, no, no. Temple never stood on what we call the Temple Mount. It was actually in the city of David. And with all the new AI and sonar equipment and so on, they tried to prove that it was in the city of David, not on the Temple Mount. You see that?
Yeah.
Now, besides this confusion, it's to me is really funny because at the same time, Arabs and Palestinians deny that there was a Jewish temple there. Are you aware of that?
Well, that's some revisionist history, but
Exactly. Revisionist history. Because when you look at this document, Al Haram al Sharif, and this is from 1956. It's produced to present guide to the Dome of the Rock. It states that the Dome of the Rock, its identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. Now, I'm sharing this because it's produced by Muslim authorities.
of course, and I think any Muslim theologian would agree that the Dome of the Rock is where Solomon's temple stood, because famously that's where Muhammad went on his night journey on a flying horse from that rock there in Jerusalem. And that's why it's the third most sacred site in Islam, and that's why they even have the Dome of the Rock on that site, because
Right.
it's sacred to them as well.
Right. So if we follow what is known through centuries, then the temple cannot be beside or outside or elsewhere. It's where the Dome of the Rock is. Now,
Hmm.
here's an older version from 1924. By the way, I find it interesting that Arabic word al-Haram is the same root from which Slavic languages get the word Hram. You could even hear the similarity. It's the forbidden place, it's the sacred place. It's a place where an average regulars cannot enter, you see. So it's that concept of sacredness, you see. And so this concept that the Temple Mount is the place where Solomon Temple stood has been through history. Now, I find it interesting that in 1967, during the Six Days War, the paratroopers from the 35th Brigade, they stood there. These are real pictures from the Dome of the Rock. They could have blown it up, and yet leadership said, no, don't touch it. Now, among those paratroopers was this fellow, Yisrael Stiglitz, an East European Ashkenazi Jew. You see that bearded guy?
Yeah.
He was actually wounded in the face. Here's another picture of him. He was there. 20 years later, he would establish what we know today as a Temple Institute in 1987. Now, he's a big, not just proponent, but driving factor. He's a catalyst for the Temple Institute to recreate everything, to train people, to present an idea for the temple to exist.
The Dome of the Rock has stood there for so long that no matter who has conquered the land, it still stands. So, for example, in the Six Days War, they didn't destroy it. But even
Right.
earlier, during the Christian Crusades under the Pope, the Dome of the Rock was already there, and the
Mhm.
Christians never thought to do anything with it other than to convert it into a church during the time of the Crusades. And so it's been known that that rock. Did you have the privilege of seeing the rock when you went to Israel, Dad?
Yes, we've been all around.
No, but you saw it. It's a rock. It's literally a rock inside that building, where is probably the most sacred site on earth. And yet, somehow in the last 50 years, people have decided they can move the rock, I don't know, by 80 feet to the left.
Now, listen, you hear these latest speculations when Iran war started and the bombs start falling. Some people start speculating, well, they have an opportunity to blow the Dome of the Rock and then blame Iran for that, okay? But let me show this short video clip from this Jewish fellow. He's got the gun with him, okay? He's got the gun. Listen how passionate he is.
Because this war and this Purim is a one thing. It's about the Temple Mount. It's about the temple in Jerusalem. We're going to build the temple in Yerushalayim. It's going to be now. It's going to be later. It's going to be. And this war, one way or the other, is going to bring to a temple in Yerushalayim. The temple is being built in Jerusalem. That's what this war is really about. Everything else, Iran, this, that, bad guys go down, we go up. That's what's happening. We're going to see a third temple in our lifetime.
Now, you see the confidence?
Yeah.
Some of these Jewish Zionists, they're said that they need the third temple, that they would rule the earth. Now, they're Christian Zionists. Listen to this Pentecostal preaching.
So we can get that third temple rebuilt and usher in the coming of Jesus.
So these Pentecostals want to rebuild the temple to usher the coming of Jesus. Their eschatology, their theology based on this. Now, some see it a bit different. This guy is an interesting fellow. He was a police officer, member of SWAT team in Los Angeles, and then he turned adventure and he's traveling around the world.
Christ cannot come again unless the temple is rebuilt. Antichrist is going to go into the temple, the next temple, the third temple, stop temple worship, declare himself to be God. Then we have the next 3.5 years of tribulation. So there's got to be a temple.
You see that understanding?
Yeah, so wait. If I correctly determined, so there's got to be a temple for the Antichrist.
Oh,
So,
yes. Oh, yes.
so it's not the temple of the Lord, it's the temple for the one against the Lord.
Hold that thought. There's a lot of confusion, but see, their understanding of end time events, of coming of Christ, is contingent on rebuilding the third temple.
Sometimes we as Adventists we get accused for a false understanding of salvation, and they call it incomplete atonement. That Christ did not redeem us fully at the cross. But I often find it is evangelical theology that shows incompleteness at the cross. So Christ has to refight the battle that he won and said it is finished at the cross, and he has to do it again at the end of time. Seems ridiculous to me for that take on salvation history.
Exactly. But this guy, Robert Carnock, he is the president of Bible Archaeology Search and Exploration Institute. He's called it BASE, based out in Colorado Spring. And when I listened to him, I realized he is very similar to another fellow from previous decades. I don't know if you ever heard of Ron Wyatt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
I want to see
We
it.
actually stopped with you there at Cornersville in Tennessee, where his museum used to be. And that guy was very popular through the 1980s and 1990s. He died in 1999. And since then, family sold all the belongings in the museum. It doesn't exist. Last time we stopped with you, it was defunct. But the guy claimed all kind of stuff. He even claimed that he found the Ark of the Covenant underneath where the cross of Christ stood, and the blood dripped and the serum, and he even scraped it to do the DNA test. I mean, the claims he made were just absurd. All right? Now, I find it funny because this is his version, his description of how the ark looked like, but he claims it was in the stone box and so on. And I find it absurd because the Maccabees, second Maccabees, make a clear statement that the ark was hidden by Jeremiah in a cave at Mount Nebo, an unmarked cave that it would never be found again. Listen to this interesting fellow, another soldier. He was a major in IDF, Israel Army, retired now, former major. But he's very popular. He got huge views on YouTube. Listen again how he brings this point.
So, yes, the Jewish people will build a third temple. This temple in Jerusalem will be linked to the rise of the Antichrist, who will appear to bring peace to the Jewish people, but will ultimately betray them.
Now, I find it funny how they say Antichrist. I know it's just weird English pronunciation. But this whole idea that the temple is for the Antichrist. This is another huge subject there. Now, I have to tell this story. I remember befriending a Pentecostal fellow, and we were discussing Bible with him. And I knew that his church was sending regular donations to different Jewish foundations in Israel that work toward the third temple. And I say to him, so help me to understand, why are you sending money for the third temple? He goes, well, what do you mean, why? For the Antichrist to sit in. And so I said, so again, run this by me again. You are sending money to build a temple for Antichrist? That's how twisted this theology is, because they totally misunderstand 2 Thessalonians 2:4. And they believe that that man of sin, son of perdition, that will sit as God in a temple of God has to do with some human being in the future restored third temple. Totally missing the point that this is a parallel with Revelation 13. And we'll record something in the future. We'll unpack this a bit more. But I find interesting that in different parts of the world, there are attempts to rebuild their own versions. For example, in Brazil, there is a billionaire preacher, pastor, who built his church to resemble kind of Solomon's temple, but it's bigger. I mean, it sits some like 10,000 people. It has all these beautiful menorahs in the walls and whatnot. It's huge. It's huge. I don't know if you follow that. And so he's preaching there, and I find it's interesting. So you build a temple and you sit in it, and if you believe that description of Antichrist, makes you wonder, how do you fit in all this?
Yes.
And see, the biggest claim to the third temple is Ezekiel's vision. Because see, the temple built by Zerubbabel did not follow Ezekiel's structure. The temple built by Herod also did not follow Ezekiel's vision. In fact, when you consider Ezekiel's vision, the temple he envisioned was much larger than anything that was ever built on the Temple Mount. In fact, Ezekiel's temple cannot fit on the Temple Mount.
Mm.
And that's why I don't want to even touch this, Danny, because there's a plenty of evidence in the Bible that Ezekiel's vision of the temple is what John the Revelator saw when he describes the New Jerusalem. And we'll do a special session just to cover this. But now I want to get back to this hoax. I'm using that word with intent, hoax
Yeah.
of the third temple. A part of what Bible Institute does, they teach the Kohanim. And again, I find it funny because Kohen is a term that applies to grandchildren of Levi, and so they're the high priest. And so the line of Kohen is supposed to be high priest. But as Jews disperse through different parts of the world, their last names take different endings. Kahanovich, Kahansky,
Okay.
right? And in English, it's Cohen. Even the crown is created,
For them.
the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Holiness to the Lord. And so I ask AI to give me a picture of possible candidate for the high priest who comes from Cohen line,
Yeah.
someone who would fit that bill. And you have to see this. This is what AI produced.
Yeah.
Do you recognize the fella?
Sasha Baron Cohen.
Exactly. Because he is a Jew from the line of the high priest, Cohen. That's his last name. Okay? This guy would be excellent actor for that last temple and the Antichrist and the high priest, because it's total nonsense. Surprise! We've got the third temple for you. Now, I find it funny because even in Zerubbabel's and Herod's temple, there was no Ark of the Covenant. But all these attempts, they picture that in the new rebuilt temple, there will be somehow the Ark of the Covenant.
Because that's where he needs to sit, on the ark.
Right. And so when I look at this, prophecy of Jeremiah comes to mind because he warned Jews, says, do not trust these lying words, the temple, the temple, the temple. You know, they rely so much on the presence of the temple that they thought their city would not be destroyed because it had the temple. And Jeremiah said, the temple will not save you. And I think that attempt of people to rebuild the temple somehow to Usher's second coming fits in the same categories.
On this remark that you make on the temple of the Lord, and how people are trying to make the temple of the Lord into some type of object to usher around either their end time view of the Antichrist or a restoration of the land of Israel. It's not a new phenomenon of people treating the sanctuary as a sacred object, even when God is not present in what they're doing. Because I think even all the way back to the book of Samuel, where priests carry the ark into battle as if it's a sacred object to protect them in war, and they lose anyways because you cannot
That's right.
treat the objects of God as if they are somehow toys to be played with and make them
Magic
feel like
tools.
play with them. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is where I know you have one of the best metaphors of illustrating this, and it's one that we learned uniquely. You called them cargo cults, I think.
Yeah, so let's go there. Let's go there. This is the metaphor that I've been using for a couple decades, and I call it empty perfume bottle. Now, some people keep antique perfume bottles or just old perfume bottles. I know your mom, my wife. She's got a lot of perfumes, but sometimes she would leave just a tiny little bit without totally using and throwing away because it brings memory of what once precious. Now, do you really need an empty perfume bottle?
No.
What was there has been gone and used. Yes, it may have memories, but what is the use of it? And so I would say that the same applies for the temple. And it's all paraphernalias. It was there to teach object lessons. That's it. It's been used, it's been done, and it's no different than empty perfume bottle.
Yep.
But I will push even further. I've learned about cargo cult. And to me, that is the best illustration ever. Now, we're not going to explain it in details. People could go on Wikipedia and read about cargo cult. But the idea is that in Melanesian, Polynesian islands during World War II, the natives, people who live on those islands, they did not interact much with outside culture. All of a sudden, Americans and Japanese and British and French, they needed to use those islands for their war logistics. And so they start building landing for their planes. They start using those islands.
Supply depot. Yeah.
Right. And they would drop cargo. But when the war was over, the cargo stopped, the planes left, military left. And so a few charismatic leaders encourage people for this sympathetic magic. If you just dress like soldiers and march like soldiers and pretend to be like soldiers and go through these rituals, maybe those steel birds would come back and drop the cargo again. And we'll get all those goodies and jeeps and uniforms. And so they literally march there, different islands. This is not just one congregation, it's a whole cult. It's called cargo cult. You see, people believe that by enacting some actions, they could bring the past back. They would build planes from banana leaves and sticks. They would go through rituals. Some of them would build these wooden headphones and pretend they're talking to someone, calling on their ancestors to bring the cargo back. It's a cargo cult. And I would say to people who feel that the temple needs to be restored because we just want to celebrate feasts again, that is no different than cargo cult. That is no different than empty perfume bottle. We just want to keep it because it reminds us of what was done. And to me, that's silly because instead of understanding the spiritual significance, okay, they want to cling to the rituals as if they carry some magic power.
No, and to me, it's troubling, especially for Christians, because we are taught to believe, as is our faith, that Christ is above all things. He is the sum of all things. And the only temple Christ ever promised to rebuild was his body in John chapter 2. He said that destroy it and I'll build it back up. And now, after the cross, the only temple that does remain upon the earth is his body, the church, where we are the temple. It says that in 1 Corinthians 3, and Peter would say you are being built as living stones. And so we are the temple, and it's not for us as a church, for Christians, to go about trying to build a third temple is literally, theologically, but in a literal sense, undermining the validity of the church itself. Because Christ said, this is the temple, my body, the church. And that's all we need until he comes again to inhabit this temple for the bride that he will come to claim. And so to me, I've always found it funny that the legitimate temple, Christian churches, are trying to build an illegitimate temple, the third temple in Israel, for an illegitimate Christ, or their view of the Antichrist. And to me, that's where the deception of the devil is very effective, and that somehow he got people who believe in the gospel message to be chasing some weird goose chase that will never happen, because Christ will come before any of that needs to take place.
And so my last comment is this. I'm not a prophet, and maybe they would manage somehow to build the third temple, because we know that there will be deceptions in the future.
Yeah.
But even if that would be only a museum, because God does not need the third temple. Even if evangelicals want the third temple for some antichrist, God doesn't need it. This is never God's will. And that's why you're right. Perhaps Christ will come before there will ever be a third temple. And imagine the disappointment of millions of people who said, how could it be? We thought there would be temple, there would be Antichrist before Jesus comes. And here's Jesus came. And do you see the confusion that it would bring people into? And so my final statement is this, Danny. The temple, its furniture, its rituals, its feast existed for one thing: to teach humanity the plan of salvation, to teach humanity the role of Jesus as our Savior and intercessor. and it was to point to what Christ is doing now. That's it. Once it was done and accomplished, its role as an object lesson is finished. And us trying to play with the trinkets that were given to be object lessons is like children continuing to play with Lego and refusing to move into the house that is built for them.
To add to the irony, it's as if Noah built another ark after he already survived the flood. It's as if they went
Just
back to
in case.
Egypt. Yeah, just to cross the Red Sea again. It's as if they did all these things, and doing those things undermines what God has already done for us. And to me it's irreverent, it is blasphemous for Christians to try and go about building a third temple when Christ's sacrifice split the veil in twain already. And why would we try and undo what he did?
You hear people like Pete Hegseth and other leading people influenced by their pastors, perhaps, talking about the miracle that needs to happen, the third temple rebuilt, totally missing the point of why temple existed in the first place.
And that's why the point of these lectures and more real, because I've heard you preach the sanctuary for my entire lifetime, but I still enjoy being refreshed, learning from you. And what I've learned through these recordings is that there's still a whole lot of people out there that are missing even the basic points of the sanctuary doctrine. And if they don't get them, they'll fall into deceptions like the third temple. And that's why we're having these conversations, so that people see, because it is a very simple point that the third temple is redundant. I think it's obvious, and you preach it clearly that it's obvious we don't need a third temple. But it's surprising how many people fall for that deception when they fail to grasp the symbolism of the sanctuary is Christ, and Christ is all in all.
And so we're going to stop here. We're not going to continue with looking at more trivia and details of the sanctuary. We'll do that eventually. We'll come back for the daily and some other interesting details. And we'll unpack Ezekiel and Revelation and more. We'll look into judgment and more. But next two sessions we're going to do would be even more interesting. We'll do two parts on the development of understanding the sanctuary within our church. How did we, Seventh-day Adventists, come up with this concept of the sanctuary? So until next time, God bless you.